Welcome back to the Funding Blueprint, where we dive deep into the world of startups, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Today we have a very special guest who embodies this essence of leadership and business acumen. Joining us today is Joel Trammell, a serial entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience as a CEO. Joel has twice founded and led startups to 9-figure exits and has also served as CEO of network services provider Black Box Corporation. As a leading CEO educator, Joel shares his extensive expertise through speaking engagements nationwide and contributions to Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Inc.com. Joel is the author of 3 influential books, The CEO Tightrope, The Chief Executive Operating System, and, lastly but not least, The Manager Bold Playbook. He is also the co-founder of CEOs, a system designed to support CEOs in achieving predictable business performance. Additionally, he serves as a chairman emeritus of the Austin Technology Council. Currently based in Austin, Texas, Joel has spent his time with his wife and 3 kids and can often be found on the tennis court during his free time. We are thrilled to have Joel on the show today to share his insights on the role of the CEO, the journey of entrepreneurship, and the keys to achieving business success. Let's welcome Joel to the show.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Pleasure is all ours. So I want to kind of hop right in and just mention that the startup world thrives on disruption, agility, and the relentless pursuit of growth. But what happens when that scrappy startup becomes a well-oiled machine, a dominant force in its industry? The CEO who led the charge from the garage to the corner office might find himself needing a new set of tools. So Joel, you've seen many companies navigate this transition from startup to enterprise. Can you elaborate on the key differences between the mindset required for a startup CEO and the leadership approach needed for a scaled-up enterprise?
Sure, and it's, when things grow, we tend to assume they grow linearly and scale things linearly. But the responsibilities and the job of the CEO is not really a linear growth pattern. It's really a set of step functions. And so I describe the CEO role when you have 1 to maybe 20, 25 employees. Most founders that are talented can do that role, and the CEO job is only a small piece of what they're doing at that stage. They're also typically performing all of the executive roles. They're being the VP of sales. They're being the VP of marketing. They're being often the CFO and the chief HR person as well. And so then you grow the organization past about 20 or 25 employees, though, and no longer is it possible for you to know what everybody's doing in the organization, to know and assign tasks and keep track of everything. And so you have to change your approach. And as you scale from 25 to typically 100, 150 employees, you have to give away each of those executive hats, the VP of sales hat, the VP of marketing hat, to people who are far more qualified and experts in their particular area. And then if you do it right, you wake up at about 150 employees and you have this full executive team. Now, kind of the interesting thing is I've run organizations from hundreds of employees to thousands of employees, and it didn't feel dramatically different running a 250-person company and running a 4,000-person company. In both cases, I had a full executive team. I had a board that I had to work with. I had some individual contributors that were important. And yeah, the 4,000-person company was a public company, so I had to read a statement each quarter that the lawyers wrote. But day-to-day operationally, they weren't very different. But it is very different running a 200-person company compared to how you run a 20-person company. And many startups fail, or startup founders fail, because they try to run the 200-person company 10 times as fast as they ran the 20-person company, doing the exact same things. And no person can scale like that.
Great points. Great points. So, would you say it's harder to run? Because I'm sure in the beginning, obviously, it's a lot harder to run and build a team of 200 individuals. And it's a lot easier to kind of work with a team of 4,000 individuals once you scale and once you've grown. But would you say it's harder to kind of curate and work with 200 employees?
Well, I think the hardest job is the CEO job of the small, under-resourced startup. When you have only 20-something people, because you are constantly having to context switch between being the CEO, but also then being the VP of sales, and then somebody brings a marketing problem, then somebody brings a product problem, and there's all this context switching. In some ways, I found the larger the job, the more employees, the easier, in that you can spend more time focused specifically on the CEO role and not this constant context switching, trying to wear multiple hats all at the same time. Additionally, when you're at 4,000 people, you have a lot more levers you can pull. There are a lot more resources you can bring to bear. And so I think in some ways the small company job is harder, more demanding. Obviously, there are challenges with any CEO role, though, and it never gets easy.
Great points. No, 100%. We talked about boards very, very briefly as a part of your response, and I want to kind of touch upon that for a second. The road to success for many startups is paved with guidance from a strong board of directors. These seasoned advisors can offer invaluable insights, connections, and support. But building and leveraging that board effectively requires intentionality from founders. Joel, you've undoubtedly witnessed the power of a well-functioning board, right? Can you share some insights on some key considerations founders should have when building out their boards? How can founders ensure that board meetings are productive and they truly utilize the wealth of expertise their board members possess?
Yeah, we could do a whole hour or two webinar just on that topic alone. I think a lot of it boils down to the founder's model for what they think the board can provide and should provide. And I think a lot of founders, especially if they're founding a company, never had a board before. They often position the board in their mind as, oh, these are the wise people who have all the answers. And I just need to ask them the right questions and they'll give me all the answers for my business. And nothing could be further from the truth. When you're a founder of a company, when you're building a company, you're doing something that has never been done before. Exactly that way. Yeah, sure, people have built companies before, but they haven't had the exact set of challenges, the exact set of employees, the exact set of customers. No one has all the answers. And thinking that the board, who probably in most cases spends one day a quarter thinking about your business, is going to be able to guide you with all the answers to all the hard questions you face every day is not realistic. Now, does that mean the board can't provide value? No, not at all. But they're not some super guru CEO who can just hear a 5-minute description of a problem and give you the answer. Where they can provide guidance and wisdom is in testing your hypothesis. You say, I believe this is true based on what we're seeing. They can ask the right questions. They can call on their experience. They can use their pattern matching to ask good questions, make sure you've considered everything, and make sure you're not headed down a dead end. But don't think of them as the all-knowing source of all wisdom and think anytime a board member says something, that's a directive from the board. The other thing I always tell CEOs is boards act like a Congress, like a legislative body. The only actions that boards take are when they vote, and take a position. Now, you should certainly pay attention to individual board members' comments and consider them seriously, but that is not an action. And often founders and their teams get confused. One board member out of 7 says something at a board meeting and they think that's a directive from the board to go chase that down when it may just be that one particular board member's opinion. Again, it should be considered, but it's not a directive. And so thinking of the board, I think, with the right model, that they can be consulted, they can provide a lot of valuable questioning, they can provide often contacts and resources, but it's not like they have all the answers and know exactly what you should do. And I was just visiting with a CEO today who said in his first startup, the biggest mistake he made was taking the directive of one of the board members and doing everything they said, when instead he should have been using his own instincts and guidance, because he was working in the business 90 days a quarter and the board member was spending 1 day a quarter on the business.
So the board, from what I'm taking away from this, and I'm sure our audience will do the same, that the board isn't always right, ultimately.
That is correct. Now, if the board acts and takes a vote, obviously you have to honor the vote of the board. But any one board member giving advice is not always right and should be considered seriously, but not as a directive.
Great points. Great points. I want to fast forward and talk about innovation now. Innovation, as you know, is the very lifeblood of any startup. But true innovation goes beyond just giving customers what they say they want. It's about anticipating needs, disrupting the status quo, and creating products that truly revolutionize entire markets and industries. So Joel, you know this better than anyone. You've championed this philosophy and introduced the concept of leading innovation, not just responding to customer demands. So can you elaborate more on how founders can actually cultivate a culture of creativity and bold thinking within their teams? And what are some practical strategies founders can implement to encourage this type of out there innovation?
Yeah, and so there's a fundamental difference between innovation and continuous improvement, and both are required in products. You want any product you have, you want to constantly be improving the quality of that product. But there's a methodology for that. Innovation is very different. It's a big jump. It's a leap that happens because of somebody's insights into the market and anticipating, as famous Wayne Gretzky statement says, where the puck's going to be and skating to that instead of where the puck is. And that is very different. And so when you're doing startups, you're doing innovation. You're creating something that's never been created before. I always find the TAM slides hilarious on startups. To me, if you're doing really something innovative, the TAM currently is 0. There's currently no market for the product. There's nobody buying and selling that thing. You're creating something new. You dream that you can create a TAM that is really big, and that's the hope. And my favorite story around innovation is Lee Iacocca, who was a famous auto executive, was credited with inventing the minivan. And the way he did that, he claimed, was he watched women coming out of the grocery store, and typically it was women, and they would be carrying a grocery bag, and this is in the old days, carrying a grocery bag in one hand and a baby in the other hand, and he watched them try to get into their, at that time, station wagon vehicle, and he noticed they really struggled to open the door. Now, if I had gone and asked that particular person leaving the grocery store what they wanted in a car, they would have not have said they wanted a minivan. They'd have said they wanted a car that the door was easier to open. It required Iacocca, the engineer, understanding what was possible and what a solution would be. And so he figured out that if we had a sliding door, that would be much easier to open. And of course, eventually we automated, motorized those doors and made it even easier. And so that's what innovation looks like. It doesn't look like continuous improvement where you go out and ask people, hey, what do you want from this car? I want it to be faster. I want a bigger engine. I want it to get better gas economy. You do that as well, but those are separate activities. And a lot of times people confuse those two activities, and you never get innovation from asking the customer what they want. You get innovation from figuring out what the customer's problem is and the best way to solve that problem.
100%. No, I agree with you on that. I think innovation has to begin with founders trying to get a glimpse of the market and what it has to offer primarily, but also seeing how they can fix that market, solve that pain in the marketplace ultimately. That's where innovation will always begin and end with. So 100% agree with you on that. I want to fast forward to acquisitions for a quick sec and really talk about how the dream of a lucrative acquisition, it fuels many startup founders' ambitions. But I think the real reality is like most startups aren't built with having an acquisition in mind. Take me, for example. I'm going through a startup right now, right? And I'm kind of building out. We're about 2 years in of actually developing a product. And interestingly enough, that's not really a thought that crosses my mind. So what if there's a way to be prepared just in case that golden opportunity arises? So you've seen many companies navigate both sides of the acquisition table. Can you shed some light on the proactive tips that founders can take in the early stages of their startup journey to make their company an attractive acquisition target down the road? And what are some systems and data practices that they should probably implement to ensure a smooth and successful due diligence process if an acquisition becomes a reality?
Yeah, I think you have to start, and I ask founders this all the time, what's the purpose of the exercise? What's the goal here? It's perfectly fine to build a business that cash flows money and gives me a nice income. It's perfectly fine to try to hit a home run and build a unicorn. But you need to know what that purpose is and be explicit, because just like building a building, if you want to build a 20-story building, you don't start with a wooden framework at the bottom like you're building a house. And so you need to understand where you're headed. And then once you kind of understand where you're headed, then you can kind of work backwards to what it's going to take to get there and how long it's going to take to get there. I mean, I remember one of my startups, I remember asking the funders of the business, hey, what are you trying to accomplish here? And they said a $200 million exit. And I think that was driven by a quick back of the envelope calculation based on the amount of equity they thought they were going to have to invest in getting the classic 10x return, right? Now, 9 years later, we got a $200 million exit. I'm not going to say they were causal, but if they had said they wanted a $1 billion exit, we would have tried to build the business a little differently than if they had said they wanted a $20 million exit was enough to return. And so you've got to start with the end in mind. And so that means, my first hires when I started that business, first hire was an HR person. Why? Because I just raised $11 million and I was about to hire 20-something people. And if I got that right, everything else was going to be easy. If I messed that up, everything else was going to be really hard. Whereas the modern wisdom today is you go out and you hire 6 developers or something and they, crank away on a project. That isn't what I thought was the most important. Then the second hire was a controller because I was about to spend $11 million of somebody else's money and I thought they might want to know where it went and that we spent it in a wise manner. And so those were some things that we did up front that paid huge dividends when it came to acquisition time, because we did not have the mess that many chaotic startups end up with, where they don't have good HR policies, they've hired poorly in some cases, their books are not clean, they haven't done things, they make the acquisition really hard. And I've seen numerous acquisitions blow up because of those kind of problems. Typically when they blow up, those are the problems that they blow up over, not over some technical hurdle that wasn't solved or some customer problem, but they blow up on kind of a company not being willing to take the risks that have been created by poor administrative practices.
Yeah, I mean, I loved your reference of using Stephen Covey's Habits of Highly Effective People, a great book. And it's important as a founder as well. Even though you may not know what your product may become, whether your startup will succeed, whether you will really truly solve a pain in the marketplace with the product or service that you're proposing, I think it's important to always begin with the end in mind. That's the key. I mean, where do I see this? Where do I envision this 5-10 years from now, in essence? Am I still going to be doing this? And these are some questions that I think not just from a business perspective, but founders themselves have to ask and see, can I continue doing this? Because as the work paces up, and as a founder, it gets a lot more stressful. It's a lot more tough. And you have to question, are you really up for the challenge? So I think that is important to grasp onto that as well. So to your point, exactly. What I want to talk about now is the thrilling roller coaster ride of a startup. And obviously it takes a sharp turn when it enters the high growth phase of scaling. So founders who were once masters of agility and disruption now have to face a new set of challenges. So with your experience guiding startups through hypergrowth, what are some of the most common pitfalls founders encounter when they scale their businesses?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm big about teaching CEOs, the real CEO job, if you're doing it correctly, you should spend 80% of your time thinking about the future. And what I mean by that is anticipating what's the organization need to look like 6 months, 12 months in advance. That is not the way most founders operate, and that is not the way you operate from 1 to 20. From 1 to 20, you're trying to build a product, you're trying to ship a product, you're trying to do it without running out of money. You have to deal with the challenges of today. You can't focus on tomorrow. But over time, as you do scale, and I built a business that had 31 consecutive quarters of double-digit year-over-year growth, and I was constantly looking out, trying to look out as far as I could, which, you can't see the future 5 years in advance, but you can anticipate things 6 months to 12 months in advance. And so, for instance, I always walked around with an org chart. At the end, we had 270 people on this org chart. It was 11 by 17 sheet of paper, double-sided, color-coded with every position I thought we needed for the next 4 consecutive quarters. So that if anybody became available, even though maybe we thought we were going to hire them in Q3, if they became available in Q1, we hired them, because it's hard to find great people. And if you find great people, you need to take advantage of that. And so it's kind of an attitude that the CEO needs to have. If you're fast growing, you've got to really be future oriented and anticipating challenges, because they come quickly. And if you handle them, if you wait till they rear their heads and cause a problem, it's going to be a really chaotic growth, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. You're not going to have 31 consecutive quarters. You're going to have, a few quarters great, and then you have a bad quarter, and you got to kind of start over. And so that's the key is, are you managing the future and spending as much time as possible anticipating the challenges that are coming, as opposed to, playing whack-a-mole on the challenges of today. And so that's a question I ask founders all the time, CEOs all the time, is what percentage of your time do you spend on problems from today and yesterday, and what percentage of your time do you spend anticipating the future? And that needs to be the majority of your time if you're building a high growth company to be successful.
100%. I think to your point, to add on to what you said, I think there are certain things as we as founders we can control. We can control certain projections, right? We can control what the Q3, Q4 will kind of look like for us. But I don't think we'll be able to have the ability to kind of foreshadow or foresee what things will look like for us 5-10 years from now. I think it's important to focus on now rather than in the future, because what you're doing right now is a stepping stone to how your future will look like. So I do agree with you on that. Joel, this was an awesome conversation, really. Thank you so much for taking the time to hop on. I wanted to extend my sincere gratitude for you being a guest on our show, and I hope that our audience enjoyed Joel's insights on navigating the exciting yet challenging journey from being a scrappy startup to being an established company. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking conversations with industry experts like Joel. For listeners interested in learning more about Joel and CEOS, we'll have the links to the website and social media in the show notes. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.